Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hi guys, this is Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so they can connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is I lost my brother Robbie twice. I lost him first to hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then again to complications from that brain tumor. I only treat ears. I'm an E of ENT. I performed over 10,000 surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of the Arizona Hearing Center, and I've written a book called Listen Up, Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. Go to AZHear, www.azhear.com, and contact us with questions or any concerns. I have an awesome guest today. Today, I have Dr. Karen Melton, who's the co-owner of Hearing Care Partners and is leading a movement of medically treating hearing loss in Missouri. Dr. Melton focuses on treating her patients with hearing loss, tinnitus, and associated cognitive impairments. She's an awesome audiologist. Dr. Melton obtained her audiology degree from A.T. Still University, which is down the street from me, and her Master's of Education at University of Georgia. She enjoys camping, traveling, and reading crime fiction and leadership novels. She's happily married and has 3 children. I'm excited to have Dr. Melton here today. Dr. Melton, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, I love to hear this story. Tell me how today you're an audiologist, a full big grown audiologist, or, and how did you end up getting to the process of becoming an awesome audiologist?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. A lot of people ask that, actually. So what led me to this field, when I was in high school, I was very close with my grandfather, and we were sitting together at a holiday meal. Everyone was around the table, and I kept trying to tell him something that happened in biology class. He was a farmer. I knew he would be very interested in it. He had lived an amazing life. And so I was trying to tell him about this thing that happened in class, and he just kind of kept smiling at me and nodding and then looking away. And he wasn't really engaged in the conversation at all. Well, I really took it to heart. Like, I thought he was mad at me. I thought he didn't want to talk to me, that I had done something. So I was really upset about it. And I walked away and came back to him a week later and said, "I'm so sorry. Like, please forgive me for whatever it is. Please talk to me." And he didn't know what I was talking about. So I mentioned that I was trying to tell him this thing that happened. And he said to me, when we're all together and everybody's talking, I can't hear one person over the rest of the noise in the room. But then the words that changed my life were this. He said to me, "I feel so alone." And my heart broke. Like, it just sunk. And the idea that my grandpa, who had been on Normandy Beach on D-Day, who had lived through the Depression, who had gone from a single mule and a hand plow to combines and tractors and the things that he had seen, the life that he had lived, and to know that he wasn't sharing that with the rest of us, that he wasn't able to have those conversations that he really wanted to have, that it hurt him not to have. It just touched me. And so that was over Christmas. Well, when I went back to school in January, I went to my biology teacher and I said, "What's up with this hearing thing? Like, can you tell me about ears?" And he goes, "I don't have a clue." But he was wise enough to know that speech therapy and hearing are related. And so he got me in contact with the school speech pathologist, who I shadowed then and worked with and helped. And then I ended up, like many audiologists who are really old like me, going into speech therapy before you had to get a master's in audiology. And that's all changed at this point. But that's really how I got into this. And my grandfather died before I was able to help him, unfortunately. So one of our big goals and mission in our practice is to treat every patient like their family, to treat every one of them like they're my grandpa, like they're a relative. And what would you do to care for them? And that's just been the catalyst that has led to this crazy life of fun, changing people's lives. I mean, it's fantastic just to see people's lives transform with what we do.
Well, we certainly share that in common. It is a wonderful privilege to be able to help people. And that's really, frankly, a beautiful story, right? It kind of encapsulates the reason why we treat hearing loss, right? And so and amazing how isolation is such a part of hearing loss. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it is.
So do you have other people with hearing loss? Hopefully you don't have the genetic. Was it sound induced? Do you know, or was it genetic?
Yeah, I think that it was from noise exposure from the military, and then being a farmer, hunting, being around all of the equipment. I don't think hearing loss in our family, I don't believe is hereditary, but the noise exposure that leads to it is a common theme. So
That's hereditary.
we have a lot of men with noise induced hearing loss in our family, and women. So we see that often, and actually in our community, we have a high number of people that are doing the same types of activities. So we see quite a bit.
That's great. That's really awesome that you're passionate about it. So, obviously to care for these people, we need people who are like us to do it. And so, in the warm up, one of the things we talked about was, you getting other people in your practice to help you achieve this, to take care of there's only one of you and you can only see so much. So one of the things we can help people is by getting other people to help us. So tell me a little bit about your process of trying to find people who can be aligned and can help take care of you. So, we're talking about like, hey, I want to get other people to help me. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, that process has evolved over the years. So I've been an audiologist for 25 years, but I've owned my own practice for 18 years. And we've gone from a single location to 10 locations. So we've gone from me as a single employee to now 22 employees, I believe. And so learning all the mistakes I've made over that amount of time of figuring out how to find the right people that fit our mission. So surprisingly enough, there are people that don't have that willingness to really care and go the extra mile for a patient and treat them like they're yours. So being able to weed through and find someone that really fits that, whether it's the person answering the phone or the person keeping the books or another provider, no matter who that person might be, they all have to fit that mission and that vision. So we've worked very hard at honing in. Working hard means we've made a lot of mistakes and hired a lot of wrong people and had to backtrack. So
it's a lot of
really,
frogs.
Pardon me?
It's a lot of frogs. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I really like the process that we've developed over time. And what we found now is that we don't have turnover, that it's changed the way that our practice runs and made it a much more cohesive team because everyone is on track, on space. So our hiring process is now several steps.
So tell me about it.
Yes.
Hey, Dr. Melton, Mark Sims here. I want to come. I want a job. I want to help you take care of people. I want to be, provider in your practice. Tell me, how does that go? What's that like?
Yeah. So the first step is we have a phone interview because we want to see how things sound whenever you're on the phone with someone. The second step, if that goes well, is we ask you to fax your references to us. We're very specific in that it needs to be faxed. We want to make sure that people can follow directions. If they don't have a fax machine at home or access, can they figure out how to do that? Can they problem solve on their own? So it's not so much that I really want the reference list. It's that I want to know, are they going to follow the instructions? Are they going to follow the steps?
Just out of curiosity, what percentage don't?
About 10%. About 10% don't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's you've gotten from 10 to 9.
Yeah, right. So, and it's interesting because
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that because some of them didn't pass the phone interview, right?
Well, yeah.
So what percentage of them don't get through the phone interview? This is kind of a, we're going to whittle down to 1, I assume, right? So
exactly. Yeah. Probably another 10%, maybe. The phone interview isn't as much. I mean, most people are going to get through the phone interview. But what interests, pardon me?
If they show up.
If they 80% don't show up.
Right. So, okay.
Yep. 80% make an interview and don't show up. And that's mostly in the last 2 years, whenever things have really changed. We've seen a huge increase in the amount of people that
apply
schedule and then don't do anything. Yeah. But the funny thing is how many of those that don't fax their resumes will call later and just cancel their interview altogether. And in my mind, I'm thinking I just saved myself 3 years of headaches because it was going to end up at that place anyway. And now I'm not training someone that doesn't want to follow the steps.
Headaches and 1 hour of maybe an in-person interview.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So once they've facts, their references, then we have our first in-person interview. And one of my favorite things to do on the in-person interview is we take a Post-it note and wad it up and throw it on the floor in the lobby so that when they walk in, we just watch. Do they step over it? Do they pick it up? What are they going to do with a simple piece of something laying there? And what's really cracks me up, one time, we had a patient show up at the same time as our interviewee, and the patient held the door open for our candidate. The candidate walked in, stepped over the paper, came up to the front. The patient walked in, picked up the paper and threw it away. I'm like, the patient's hired. Yeah.
Are you looking for a position right now?
Exactly. So that's one of my favorite little things to do. And that's not like they're going to make it or they're not. Right. But it's interesting to see how they react. And I make sure it's not like a tissue or something that's going to be gross. It's usually
and they could be nervous, right? So some people are, they're focused, we all get kind of in the zone. So, but yeah, that's an interesting insight. Yeah.
Yeah. And the next thing we look for is if they engage with our staff, particularly if it's a provider. Right. So we have a lot of providers that will come in, they'll say who they are. We always tell the candidate that we're running late. And I look for body language. I look for, are you serious? I look, for how they show any kind of frustration about that. When our candidates are sitting in the lobby, then our front office person will begin a conversation and see, are they going to continue that conversation? How do they react with the staff? We do have some providers that interview that are yes, no, and very cold and very short. And in my mind, I think of it as they think of themselves as better than or higher than, and we don't do that here.
Right.
In our offices, everybody takes out the trash.
Right.
So there's not, everybody answers the phone. There's not really a hierarchy, right? We're all around one big round table sitting evenly together, and everyone has something to bring to that's important. So we have to respect and admire everyone's past and gifts they offer.
And what they bring to us, right?
Exactly. So after seeing how that reacts, we do have our in-person interview. One of the interesting things that our staff tells us after they've been with us a while is they say our interview process is so odd and it was strange. And then afterwards they see why. Right. So in ours, we don't talk about skills. We don't talk about how well they know computers or how we talk about what their personality is.
It's presumed that they can do the technical component of the job, right? That's kind of
it's presumed, yeah.
Or you can train them to.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm more interested in, are they coachable? Are they likable? Are they interested in the same things that we are as far as really serving and helping people? So we look for things from, if you've ever read The Ideal Team Player. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I love that book, but it talks about being humble.
Right.
So we look for humility in the person, being smart, and not necessarily book smart or IQ smart, but
being savvy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we really try to hone in on those items and make sure that fits. Once they've finished that interview, we generally have them leave. We will send them a skills test, again, just to see if they'll jump through the hoop. Like, are they going to do it? And that is going to be more of a technical thing. Can they open an Excel sheet? Can they start a Word document? It's very simple.
Send them like an Excel spreadsheet and say, can you please tell us what's in cell A32? Is that what you do?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's actually online skills tests that you can send. Yeah, so we might send like a letter and say, find all the errors in the letter. It's just, and I'm not really that interested in actually what it is as much as.
A lot of this is the screen, right? In other words, before you invest more energy in them, you're asking, it's reciprocity, right? You're asking them to give you some of their effort, right?
Yeah. We have them come back then and meet with the team. So the team can ask them questions. Many times it's the same questions as what we've given before, and we're looking for consistency.
Right.
Or if there's one area that I'm not quite sure about that I didn't get a good, strong response from, I might ask the team to really hone in on one specific thing. So we look for interaction. We look for how well they blend, how well they get along with everyone else. And then finally, I like to ask the candidate and their family to dinner with my husband. I like to see how they interact with their spouse. Sometimes I'd rather have the spouse than the candidate, which is always a good thing. Those are the ones I hire.
Right.
But I like to see, how do they handle their children and how they handle that stress? Because there's a lot going on then whenever they have, more people around and involved. How are they with the wait staff? So those are the things that have really led us to get much better about who we're choosing. But I think the most important thing of all is waiting for the right person instead of just looking for a warm body to take the seat. I think that's one of the hardest things is as soon as someone decides to move away with their husband for a job, which who would ever want to leave here for that? I mean, they should totally let their husband go away and they should just stay with us, but it does happen. Yeah. So, whenever it does happen that someone unfortunately exits our work family, then there's always a pressure to hurry up and get someone else. And I think it's hard to stop and say, we're going to get through it. We can handle it. We're going to get the right person, because getting the wrong apple in the bunch just spoils the whole bucket. So we really have to make sure we have the right folks.
It's always like this fear, like, oh my gosh, they did so much. How are we going to get that done? And my experience is it might be painful, but the work always gets done. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of it too, right? Like the sky's not falling. We love this person. And, we want them to actualize themselves too, right? I mean, obviously, I know you're being facetious. It's like, look, we want somebody who cares about their family and is actually willing to stay with their spouse for the sake of the family unit, right? Not, right. Oh, well, you go do your thing and I'll do my thing. That's probably not the ideal team member.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny when we go to hire someone, the team gets really nervous. They're like, we really love what we have. We really don't want to mess this up, and whenever we do have someone who maybe slips through, they have a good face, but then once 6 months, a year go by, you're like, oh, this really isn't what we thought we hired. When that happens, it's interesting. The team really pushes them out, basically, that it isn't a good fit. There's just a lot of struggles, and I hate to see that. So you got to hire fast. Hire slow and fire fast. Yeah.
And so, how do you align them with your values? I mean, do you go over it specifically, or do you have particular measurements, or what is it that you do?
Yeah, we talk a lot about that mission and vision. We talk a lot about the mission of really caring for people no matter what. We talk a lot about walking the patient through their journey, walking alongside them. It's not a transaction at all. It's the beginning of a very long relationship. We want patients for life. We want them to stay with us for the rest of their lives and bring all their friends and family to us as well.
Which is what Great Hearing cares about, right?
Yes.
And so I always tell patients, I say there's a difference between getting hearing aids and getting your hearing loss well treated. And so you're looking to get people's hearing loss well treated, not just give them physical objects called hearing aids and moving on.
Correct. Yeah. And some days giving someone something for free, if we can get them into a foundation where we don't get paid, those are the days that we have the biggest high fives. The group always celebrates every time someone is able to be helped. And I don't care what kind of help it is. I don't care if someone calls here thinking we're a competitor. Give them the competitor's number that they're looking for. Whatever it is, if the FedEx guy needs a bottle of water, give him water. I don't care who it is or what it is. We're here to help. We're here to serve. And I believe that everything else will follow the line if we keep that focus. Because like you said in the beginning, when we were chatting before, you were talking about how you don't get that everywhere.
Right.
That in our healthcare field, we just don't see that as often as it seems like it's such a simple thing. It seems like it's such a natural, easy thing. And it's very rare.
No, I mean, I think, that's unfortunately across the board. And some of that there's a lot of, that's like 27 podcast episodes, right? About
right.
why that is that way. And so we'll just say we choose to be different, not to try to figure out why it is that way. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, that's fascinating. Any other insights or tips in that particular time in terms of how about providers? Like, is there something more you do in terms of people who are going to be the direct hearing healthcare providers? Is there something different, or
the thing I like
skills? Do you do something like a working interview or something like that, or what do you do?
I always have our providers shadow us for a day. I feel like a day together gives us plenty of time to discuss I like asking, I like asking the providers really what their goals are. And we go over goals with all of our staff, but particularly with the providers of where do they want to be? What do they want to be? And trying to make sure that we can align with that and support it and get them to that goal. So that's one of the big focuses. But I like spending that day with a provider. That gives us a lot of time for them to see a lot of the different things that we do here, make sure that they're aligned with it. I like having them submit an audiogram that they've completed. I just like to see, are they doing interactives? How are they masking? If there's any of those types of skills, maybe that that we'd like to see in our providers and what they're doing day to day. But as far as like having them sit down and actually do it, we don't do that so much. I feel like having the conversation is enough. Do they do real ear with every fitting? That's a huge.
I hope so.
Huge thing. I hope so too. Yeah.
I mean, I say to people, that's like your primary care doctor giving you blood pressure medicine and never taking your blood pressure. And it's kind of one of those things, like you're saying, it's so simple, right? But it's how not prevalent it is. So we'll leave it at, again, that's another 27 podcast thing that we can explore or not explore, because we choose to do differently. So, well, that's great. That's really, and I suspect, fortunately or unfortunately, as I tell my children, there's no substitute for experience, and wisdom comes from mistakes and experience. And I suspect that is a culmination of many mistakes and a lot of experience and a lot of probably reflection, right? Trying to figure out, like, how can we, it's the proverbial postmortem. Oh, that didn't work out. How can I avoid that this time?
Right. Yeah. I'm the master of mistakes. Anybody wants to know about how not to do it right, I got it down.
Yeah. I had a mentor who, he used a lot of expletives, and he would say, the reason I'm telling you this is because I've expletive everything up in my entire career, and I'm trying to prevent you from doing the same. I was like, I mean, I appreciate that. It was actually, obviously put a couple of expletives with it. It becomes a little more colorful, but you get the point.
That's great.
Yeah. So, bringing it back more to, individual patients, we all have like favorite patient stories, right? Like, what was that one? Or we hopefully, likely, given your experience, you probably have many great patient stories, but tell me one of your favorite, patient stories. What comes to mind?
Yeah, one of my favorite patients was a younger guy. He worked for the city. He was massive. He was just a tall, big. He like took up the whole doorway. Great guy, and he came in all gruff and rough. And he was here because his wife made him come, and he wasn't happy about it. Everything's fine, and we tested him, and of course, found some issues and talked him through that. And one of the things that we hear often is, I need to go home and talk this over with my wife, right? That's one of the hardest things that we deal with, that we hear often. And I said to him, well, your wife asked you to come and do this. How happy would your wife be if you went home and said you moved forward with getting treatment? And he just slumps and he's like, she'd be happy. So we ended up fitting him, treating him, and getting it. And what surprised me the most is he's so angry about the whole thing. And he walked out the door. He was gone for like 3 minutes, came back in, and I thought, he's not even tried. Like, he's just going to hand him back. He's not even giving this a shot. And he walked back in, and tears were streaming down his face. And he said, I hear the birds. And it was like, but to see this big guy, he was all, and now he's one of our favorites. He's just a big teddy bear. He comes in and gives everybody hugs. And, but he's a phenomenal fella. But it's just that moment of him saying, I didn't realize, how often do we all hear that? I didn't realize what I was missing. I didn't realize.
I love asking people, what is the thing they realize the most? Some of them are very funny.
Some of them are, yeah. But he was one of the most touching. It was one of the first patients that I'd ever saw. And so that one meant a whole lot more.
Was that noise induced? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it was.
And is there any, obviously you're in a community with a lot of noise exposure, it sounds like. How about on the prevention side? Do you guys get involved on the hearing conservation prevention side?
We do lightly. So we have several manufacturing plants in the area, and whenever they have their annual exams, if anyone has a issue, then they refer them to us, and we do the second test to check it out. We're also involved in several of their OSHA safety meetings and getting them set up. We do custom hearing protection. We actually have a group of retired SEALs in the area that help people train them on proper gun use, and they have a whole, it's really neat. They have a whole like village that you can go in and paint, gun, shoot, and they train you on how to
all that stuff, right?
Anyway, and they do some small explosives, and it's really pretty cool. But anyway, we treat all of those fellas that come in. We fit them with custom hearing protection, and that's a big. I think most audiologists are really into protecting what you have, and
sure. You can't give it back once you've lost it. That's what I feel.
Yep. So turning it to the left, right? Turning that volume down.
Right.
Any way we can. So.
Turning to the left. Yeah. That's great. And so, kind of getting back to that, you were saying that one of the things people say, well, I have to tell my spouse. You already had let's say a pretty good framework to deal with it with that patient. What are some of the other ways you deal with that particular response?
The particular response of my companions, not with me, I have to go.
My significant.
Yeah. So again, after doing this for so long, you kind of look at all the different ways that you can handle it. A couple of my favorite things to do when someone walks in without a companion is I like to make sure that they're sitting with a chair next to them, and I'll keep referring to that chair as their spouse. So, okay, Mark, well, what would your wife Sue say about that? And I look, over to the chair and like kind of pretend like she's there. And have him put himself into her frame of mind. Yes. That's one thing I like to do throughout the visit. The other thing is many times we'll ask if we can't call them and bring them into the appointment over the phone, especially after we're finished and going over the results. We like to do that.
Is that effective? I'm just curious. I mean, that's a great idea.
Yeah, about half the time. Yeah. So about half the time they agree and we can get the spouse on the phone, and about half the time it's effective. So it's not so bad. What's more,
great. I mean, it's basically your goal is to help people. So you're trying to figure out, like, however you present yourself, we're going to help you.
Right. Yeah, we're here for you the whole way.
Right.
Another thing I say is, on a scale of I like to say things like, okay, Mark, so Sue must really love and care about you for you to come when you don't think that you need to and you don't want to. And you must really, she must really love you to ask you to do that. And you must really love her back to actually do it. And isn't that a sweet thing? You guys both are, in this together, and that's great. How happy on a scale from 1 to 10 would she be if you did something?
That's great.
Right. So it's, just trying to bring them in and when they're not present. And the hardest thing is whenever they're like, I'm here because my wife told me to, and then the wife's not there. Like That's one of the most difficult.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember earlier in my career, I would say to people like, well, you should treat your hearing loss. I go, why? I said, well, your spouse and loved ones, you can't communicate with them. I don't want to talk to them. It's like, okay. And that's an interesting, because, most of the time it's not true. Some of the times, unfortunately, it is true. So it can be a bit of a challenge when it is true, but that's a whole nother, another
one. Right. Got all kinds of list of ideas. Yeah. And so one of the things I like to do is to ask the person how it is for them. For my grandpa, he felt very alone.
Right.
For my dad, who has noise-induced hearing loss, he could care less. He could sit there for all of Thanksgiving dinner, eating by himself, not saying a word to anyone, and be happy as can be. Drives my mom insane. So I think it's important to know where that patient is coming from emotionally. How is it for them? And I'll just flat say that, whenever we try to look at what situations are they in that they want to do better? How are they handling it at the time? And then how is it for them? What are they experiencing? And if they're like, I'm fine, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then I move to who's with them. How is it for that person then that you care about?
Yeah, I always say you don't treat your hearing loss for you treat it for everybody else. Right?
Exactly.
Right. Which is the difference between reading glasses that you get because you can't read stuff, and hearing aids or hearing technology because other people can't communicate effectively with you. How about when people just say, I don't think I have a hearing loss? What do you tell them?
Well, that does come up from time to time. And like we were talking before as well, you were talking about the blood pressure you may not realize your blood pressure is high. You may not realize you have high cholesterol, but the end result is the same. You still get treated regardless. If you came in and I said, we've ran this test and it indicates that you need to take this medication to reduce your cholesterol, would you not do that? So now we have this test indicating that you need treatment for your hearing. And why would you not do that? I think it's an important thing to tie in that the situation they're struggling with, why that's happening audiologically. This is why you can't hear Sue whenever you go to Pasta House on Tuesday nights, because you've got this change here, and that's why you can hear but not understand. So I think it's important to tie their issues in with the hearing issue and tie how they feel about it and how their spouse is feeling about it all to why it's happening audiologically. It just leads them to a more rational or sane decision that, yeah, this is what needs to happen. One of my favorite things then is to have them try them. Let's demo, let's loan, so that they can experience it themselves.
Do you put people in loaners? You program them right there, and
we do.
And what's that look like? How long do you have them do it? And do you do it free during the loaner period?
It varies. It varies based on how the conversation has gone. If someone is very motivated and understanding, then we may just, what we like to do is after the audiogram is complete, we set up the loaner demos then and ask them if it's okay if we put these on and finish the appointment with them wearing them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it saves our voice, right? I think all of us are going to end up with vocal nodules by the time we retire.
Well, my family always says, Dad, you don't need to speak to me so loudly. Like, well, I understand. Sorry. Sometimes it's hard to turn that off, right?
Exactly. Or you put them in the hearing device and you're like, oh yeah, you're wearing them now. I don't have to shout anymore. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So, so we like to have them try them during the appointment. If at the end of the appointment, they're still like, I just don't know, or I need to go home and talk about it. Those things we already spoke about, then we'll let them have them for a week. Particularly if there's something that happens regularly, like they're having trouble, say, at church, right? Or
on Sunday, right? Or usually, right?
Yeah, or Saturday night family dinner, or, especially I want them to experience that. So the other thing is once they move forward, it's much easier because they already know how to get them in and out, and they know how to basically care
because they've already gotten some of the dexterity issues. And all that
exactly. Stuff. Right.
Well, that's great. That's great. So, and what do you do when they come back if they say it didn't help me?
Yeah, we like to talk a lot about why. Like, what's the why behind it? Is it that they didn't see value in it? Is that they don't hear a difference between it? Did we do RealEar whenever we should have? We talk about making adjustments to them. But basically, it really comes down to making sure that you're honing in and dialing into the why behind what they're saying. So we have to train our providers so that when they come in and say this just didn't work and they're taking them off, people aren't like, okay, right? I mean, we have to talk through that. It's a continuing of the conversation.
Yeah.
So, is it that they are concerned financially, right? Do we need to talk about payment plans or different options that can help them in that realm? But you really have to dive into that. And I like giving them the option, okay, you're saying this isn't working for you. Can you tell me more about that? Really open-ended questions that get them chatting about it more, and being sure.
This all comes down to trust, right? As long as they feel comfortable and trust you.
Yes. And that has to be built in the beginning. If we're not building that trust before taking their hearing test, it's not going to happen. Like, you have to really stop and take a good amount of time with the patient before testing them to build that trust, because anything after the test is really selling them. The patient's not going to see that as educating anymore. We have to educate them beforehand. And then once we've tested.
Do that before you know their hearing test, I mean, it's actually fascinating. What things do you talk about? And not that there aren't tons, but what are the things you decide to talk about before the hearing test to kind of initiate?
Yeah, we look at it like a funnel. So we start off very broad and very wide, just explaining to them what we're going to do throughout the appointment. We like to tell them a little bit about who we are so we can start maybe the relationship. We begin the whole the whole process with bringing them into the room. So we have our providers go into the waiting room, the providers walk them back. And generally at that point, we're looking for anything to spark conversation. What do we have in common? If they have a hat on with a baseball team that we know, we might talk about baseball,
That's always a big deal.
Yeah. Whatever we can to just start a relationship with them. So that it's a very casual conversation, but we always review what we're going to do. We tell them a little about who we are, especially if there's any points there that we can bring in that are commonalities between us, ask them how long they've lived here, if we've been here a while, things like that. And then talking, of course, about their hearing and health history. Everybody should be, doing a good history. But really, I think the most important part is getting down those places that they really want to understand people better, like really honing in on where, like painting a picture, basically. Where are they whenever they struggle? What is it?
A verbal ab fab, right? You're basically doing the ab fab, but doing that. Exactly.
Right. But I want to know, where do they have trouble in restaurants? Well, what restaurant? Where do you go? Okay, I go to Pasta House. When do you go to Pasta House? I go to Pasta House every Tuesday. Or is it usually just you and your spouse, or are there more than one person there? Because that's going to change the dynamics of it, and they'll say, it's usually me and my spouse. And so, I can see you in Pasta House. I can see you with your spouse. Like I can imagine this in my head. I've got a good picture. And then I ask them what happens? She says something, you don't hear it. What do you do? And he's like, well, I ask her to repeat or to speak up. And then I say, okay, so you're asking her to speak up. And how is that for you? How do you enjoy that? And he's like, well, it's really frustrating. All right. How do you think it is for Sue, your wife?
She loves it.
She doesn't like it either, right? She's about to leave me.
Well,
and so I think, I think getting really specific is important, and it makes that patient really feel heard. Like you're just not, I want to hear better. Nah. Yeah. What does that mean? What does that really mean? Where do you really want to hear better? What is
the true application of better hearing for them and contextualizing the treatment? Karen, this has been great, really. I mean, you're a font of knowledge. This is great. Oh. Well, no, I mean, you have great experience, and I think you've really kind of started to break it down and are able to communicate it. It's been excellent. So folks, we've been talking to Karen Melton here of Hearing Care Partners. Karen, where can people learn more about you or get a hold?
Sure. So we are found online at hearingcarepartners.com. Okay. You can also call us at 573-756-0500, and you can reach me at Karen@hearingcarepartners.com.
Oh, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.